have showing today. First of all, there's Roya Amigh. Her show, Beyond Us, is in the gallery over here. Roya's exhibition, Beyond Us, features her sculptures constructed from fragments of paper and fabric and stitched together, giving a narrative voice to women's personal, cultural, and political experiences across cultures and time. Amigh is exhibited internationally, from Korea to Greece to the United States. She is a recipient of the Paul Krasner Foundation grant and recently completed a residency at Bagenal. Next we have Jodi Colella and her exhibition here, But It Does Not Hold Water, or But It Doesn't Hold Water. This exhibition marks a new direction for Colella, who is known for her fiber-based work, as she introduces ceramics into her expansive repertoire of skills and techniques. Colella has exhibited in the United States and China and has been featured in the Boston Globe. She is a recipient of the Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship and the founder of Fiber Lab. And then we have our guest artist, Bagenal, who is actually an alumna of the Boston Sculptors Gallery, and she is showing in our Launchpad space with her exhibition, Swimming Sculptures. This show comprises sculpture, embroidered photographs, and video based on her experiences of swimming in tidal rivers and lakes as she recovered from not one, but 2 broken arms. Her work has been shown in the United Kingdom and the United States, and she has received numerous awards and residencies, most recently at Cove Park in Scotland. What I wanted to say just about all 3 of these shows is that for me, each of these 3 artists demonstrates the value of the coexistence of the fragility and vulnerability with strength and endurance. And that's it for me. I'm going to hand things over to Caroline, who is going to speak first, briefly about her show in the Launchpad Gallery, followed by Jodi and Roya, whose discussion will be led by none other than Patricia Miranda. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming. So my work, maybe a few facts might be relevant here. My father was a marine biologist, and I was born on an island in Scotland. And I really didn't swim until the pandemic, to be honest. That's when I really began swimming a lot. And my mother, I was here in the US, and my mother was dying in the UK. And swimming was really a way for me to handle grief, and it was physically really rewarding and mentally really helped me. So when I broke my arms, I continued to swim, and that really helped the healing process. So swimming has become something that actually has become quite important to me. It was during the pandemic I thought, well, if I'm swimming a lot, why don't I make some sculptures related to swimming? And so the first ones were with nets, and they were really collaborations with the rivers, how the rivers would shape the net, and tides and currents and weather, wind. And then I got a little bit more ambitious and started making more physical, 3-dimensional forms, and I was also embroidering at the same time. And the embroideries are really kind of, in some ways they're conceptual, they're thinking about our relationship to water, human relationships to water generally, and also where I try out ideas that I might want to make out of sculpture, but they're also kind of fantasy projects that might never be realized, where I just let my imagination run. And the video is also something new for me. During the pandemic, I was taking a class on documentary film, and of course, it all went online, and really, I didn't progress as well as I should have. But anyway, this is the first film I've made totally on my own, and I know it's the first of many. I'm going to keep working. I've got plans for a film on, I've made films before on the marsh, and I'm planning on making a film on other kinds of wetlands, peat, particularly the peat wetlands, because I live in the UK now. But I'm also interested in these making sculptures that I can transport quite easily. So all this work, I emptied it out, wrapped it all up, put it in my suitcase, brought it here, put it back together again. Anyway, I don't want to take up any more time. And if any of you have any questions about anything related to my work, very happy to talk to you after the big talk. Thanks very much again.
Thanks, Caroline. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. It really means a lot. What I'm here to do at this very moment is introduce the facilitator who came here from New York City to help us with our talk today. Her name is Patricia Miranda. I met Patricia because I was a member of her Crit Lab, which is an amazing, supportive discourse for artists with an incredible pedagogy and structure to help us all navigate this thing that we do. And she's also the founder of Map Space, which is an experimental curating space, gallery space in New York City. I just understood what MAP stands for. It's Miranda Art Space. She's an advocate for artists and a very smart and educated and generous person. As an artist, she's known for monumental installations. A famous one is made from donated lace that started during the pandemic that she's dyed this really compelling red from, it's a natural dye. Of course, the name escapes me right now. Cochineal, thank you. She's, from all of this donated lace, has created a lace archive. And recently, she was part of a public arts space where there was this huge triple dress hoop creature walking around New York City, and that was really a sight to behold. So this is the sort of stuff that goes on for Miranda, for Patricia, which is great. But best of all, she is a lot of fun, warm, intelligent, generous, colleague, and friend. It's been a treat to work with her during this process when Patricia wrote my essay. And I loved working so closely with her. I just love the way she thinks, and I hope it rubs off someday. We are incredibly honored to have her here today. Patricia.
Oh my God. I feel like I just won an Oscar. Can I ask you, this is such an amazingly beautiful crowd. I really want to take a big wave picture. Is that all right with you guys? Of you? Because you look so incredibly beautiful. Can we do that? All right. Everybody say cheese and throw up your hands. Wave. Everybody wave. Okay, thank you. Thank you for indulging me. That was an incredibly generous introduction. I'm really honored to be here, really a thrill and a privilege to work with these incredible artists. I'm a big fan of both of them as artists. I'm also a huge fan of artist-run culture, artist-run spaces, places that create opportunities, generate opportunities, help artists support one another, create community. I think community is the only way that we can really move forward as artists in our world today. And it's incredibly powerful and meaningful. And so I think this gallery is amazing. It's a museum quality gallery that is a cooperative and is run by artists. So what could be better than that, in my view? We're an amazing tribe. So I'm a big fan of that. I wanted to say that the last time I was here, I was coming up to Boston before the Crit Lab, before the pandemic because of the Crit Lab. The last time I was in this space was for Jodi's show on Thursday, March 12th. You can imagine. 2020. No, 2020. Yeah, 2020. We all know what happened then. Helping with her curating the show she had then, and I drove back to New York, and the next day we shut down. So it was incredible. We'll never forget. It'll never lose my mind. it'll never go out of my mind, that specific date. So it's really a thrill to be here now and see all of you and to celebrate. But you didn't come here to listen to me. So I'm really excited to talk with these artists about their work. I have so much to say, but we will only have time to touch on, there's a lot of depth to this work. There's a lot of heart and a lot of depth, a lot of intelligence to all of this work. We will only be able to kind of dig this deep into it, but I have just a few sort of things that I want to introduce as questions. Well, first, what we want to do is have Jodi and Roya each say just a few words about their shows, in particular about these exhibitions, and then I have some questions for them, and hopefully we can have a discussion with all of you. So, keep your questions, keep them in hand, and we'll start. So, do you want to start? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Roya. So Beyond Us, I made it with, so many layering of handmade paper out of petals, out of dandelions, combining it with sheets of lace, pieces of cloth, mirrors, and then I stitched them into fragmented pieces, and we will talk about fragmentation later, I think. Welcome to the talk, and welcome to our show.
Where do I begin? This is very new work for me. I'm known for working in fibers and working sculpturally. I was introduced to clay a year and a half ago, and my life changed. So I'm obviously into materiality. I honor labor and tradition and time in my pieces, and I'll talk more about that later. I guess that we'll cover it until we get to the questions.
Okay. I know. Applause until we finish, maybe no, that's great. All right, so I want to start with a couple of questions for both of the artists, and then a question for each of them individually. Is everybody hearing okay? I know I'm pretty loud, so I'm like Italian American. Both of you employ craft, especially craft histories, defined as feminine. Historically defined as feminine crafts, right? Such as textile, weaving, sewing, lace, among many others. They are both technique and method in the narratives of your work with a distinctly feminist lens, albeit with some different viewpoints. I love this pairing because the work is very distinct and very different, and yet there's some really wonderful overlaps and threads. You really can't, so sorry, it's just like fiber words, you can't help the metaphor of threads. So with the different viewpoints, using these powerful craft histories as ways to communicate. So craft is not only a means in the work, but it importantly is inextricable to content. So the visibility of craft in this work, in my view, serves the narratives. It's not only a means to an end, right? It is actually content in and of itself, and speaks to a kind of politic in the work, like a kind of politic of material plus content, or material as content. So I want to ask you guys how each of you think of your relationship to craft histories, and how you see these as instrumental to both the intimate personal narratives in the work, but also the kind of social political narratives that show up in the work. I know these are really big questions, so we'll see if we can, get a little bit of input and maybe continue the conversation as we go. Anyone want to jump in first?
Okay, I'm going to break this down. How craft is related to my work. I am someone who was brought up with craft. I've always done it. It's been in generations of my family. I have grandmothers who made ends meet in the rural South, and other ones who were second-generation immigrants. And their life with scarcity sort of affected everything that came down towards us. And in general, craft is something that's historic and passed down through generations of tradespeople and of craftspeople. So it's one of those connections that we all have to the past. Personally, craft, for me, with these objects, is also generational. And it's sort of intergenerational discussion. Everyone who came before me is a part of me. All of these pieces are made from fabrics from my history. I did not purchase or find anything new for this because each one of these pieces has agency and has some purpose in terms of my memory of who I am and where I came from. And that's where the craft kind of comes through me, where it's not only the historic, traditional sense of it, but the personal. What else did you add?
That was great.
That was great.
So everyone, we can, yeah, we'll come back, yeah. Cover it.
I think, okay, my background is in painting, but right after graduation, I stopped painting and I started working with thread, paper, and pieces of cloth. And I have a very intimate connection with this material. I don't come from, background of craft. My family, they have completely different background, mostly an engineer. I think it came to me naturally. That intimacy and also spending so much time creating each drawing by gluing thread in paper, it's very, it's a meditative process, a meditative experience for me. And also, I think historically, I feel it feels right to me to use these materials to talk about how, struggles, the common shared experience we have as a woman. So that's the historical connection of myself with the material.
Should we gather around?
Oh, yeah.
Let's gather around.
Yeah,
I feel like a 50s, doo-wop.
If only I could sing.
Okay, so related to this interest, this deep interest in craft and materiality is a sense of tactility in all of the work, in the very embodied materialities that you each use, materials that are soft, malleable, responsive, adaptive, and engage a sense of touch. Even if that touch is visual touch, that sense that this is work that would feel like, that you want to touch or has a history of touch even. They also clearly leave evidence of the hand in both of the work, right? So the sort of, the stitching is not hidden. The sort of language of making is very visible in the work. Again, not just as a means, but also as content itself. So this seems very related to the notions of craft, and also seems essential to the things that you both care about, right? This kind of intimacy of touch. So can you say something about touch, the hand, the tactile, and you can relate that, to the ideas around craft, or however you think about touch, even when we feel like we're touching with our eyes. I don't know about you, but when I look at this work, I feel like I'm touching, even though I can't. So do you want to say something about touch? I'm not it's not small talk to me ever.
Well, for both Roya and I, it's all about the surface and the material. And in my case, since I'm using a lot of materials, my father's plaid shirts, drapes from my mother's 1960s apartment, my son's striped dress shirt, old knitting projects that were never finished, all these sorts of things. They're very kind of relatable. So when you look at something that's a pinstripe, it's a man's suit or pants. And so that must have meaning, and who was that person? Or maybe you have associations with it, because clothing and fabrics have agency. So most times the texture makes you want to touch it, but all the time it makes you, I forget what I was going to say. But anyway, so that's, my son once said to me when I was worried about exhibiting something in public that was fiber, and he said, "Mom, you have to get over it. You can't expect people not to touch your work when you make it so touchable." And I think about that every single time. So, and I also aim to touch people metaphorically. I want to beckon them to touch. I want them to want to touch and then hold themselves back. And then in private, I'll let you touch.
Yeah, and also, yes, I think it's, for me, it's a metaphor for, the tangible experiences we have, and that's very important in my work. And also the amount of time you spend to create, all these texture and the tactile quality of your work. And that's something, I don't know, it comes, I think through the history, through the narrative I have in my work, it makes sense to have that tactile quality and the texture.
Also, the type of work that you're talking about, that evidence of the hand, and it's like the labor, it's the history of the making even, not even the history of the concept. It's like people know that you've been handling this, or someone has, right? And it sort of embodies a presence.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. It feels also alive, it doesn't die.
Right.
And I really like that aspect of touchness or tactile.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like we want to gather. We keep walking away. Well, the idea of touch, there's an intimacy to it, right? That is, I think, present in both of the work. And textile, I know there's more than textile here, but the references to textile are really strong, and the textile is always something that is in touch with the body, right? Whenever we see textile, we think of its relationship to the body. So I think that there are intimations of bodies here, all over, and so that's definitely that sense of touch, something that is touch, something that will touch, something that can touch. All those seem powerful in the work for me. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and also I guess I should add something about touch and about body. So the construction of my work comes from vagina, vulva, clitoris, and I'm going to making work about uterus too.
Thank you for saying those words. I'm here for that. No, that's great. So I have a couple of questions. This is great because I think these are themes that you both share in the work, these relationships, and also these histories, right? And there's a politic in that. Politic of craft histories, politic of women's work that is invisible, has been invisible, right? Sewing and textile and all that in the home. So making that labor visible in the work, I think is really powerful. It speaks to, without, again, ceding ground, like feeling like we have to transform it into something that occupies a kind of masculine space, but can be in that public space and maintain that sort of softness and adaptability and responsiveness as powerful attributes, right? So yeah, that's beautiful. So Jodi, there's a pivot, there's a significant pivot in this work for you, which is really interesting, which I've written a little bit about in the essay. And since I've known your work for some time, and I assume many of you have as well, much of your past work used these craft histories in very powerful and directed feminist narratives, like a very specific kind of narrative that wants to be communicated in the work, and about women's voices, women's autonomy around bodies, politics of grief, I think also. So this work is this less narrative, sort of more open, has a kind of intimacy that's a little bit different, rather than a kind of thematic intimacy. It feels like a very personal intimacy. So, and also that there's the introduction of clay, and we've talked about how clay, which is a hard, unresponsive, when it's dry, is hard and unresponsive, whereas fabric remains soft and tactile. They seem to have kind of switched places, that the clay is opening up this kind of intimate space, and the textile is kind of holding that space. It's very interesting. So can you talk a little bit about
The pivot?
yeah, the pivot, and both the sort of conceptual pivot and the intimacy, the less narrative, but also the introduction of ceramic into how that's affected that.
Yeah. Well, my previous work, I was responding to the oppressive environment to many different groups of people, particularly women. I'd be in situations where I'd be examining a photography catalog in the museum and witness the erasure of women's identities because they were not identified in the catalog. All the men had everything about them, where they worked, who they married, how many kids, where they lived, and although 75% of the women had the title unidentified women. So I had no choice. I wanted to give voice to this thing. And also another piece was the once was Poppy Memorial that's now in the Fuller collection. And that was about the exploitation of drug companies to individuals in the loss of life, like 72,000 in one 10-year period. So those were sort of like very directed themes that I wanted to communicate a feeling about. And then my last show, Faculty of Utterance, it was sort of a retrospective of 5 years worth of this work. I could go on, I have a million other pieces that talk to this. But when I had that show, after it was complete, of course it was the middle of the pandemic at this point, and we're all isolated and we have nothing to do, well, not that we have nothing to do, but it caused me to have some introspection about what it was that I was doing, and I was feeling like the previous work, I felt a little bit like a third person, that it was important work to me, and it's very valid work, but I was ready to dig for my own voice instead of everybody else's voice. And right after I started feeling this, the things started opening up, and I took a beginning hand building class in Portland. And, you know, like right from scratch. And I remember touching that clay that day, and it was like, all right, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I just went from there. I took some classes, and in this particular place in Portland is a wonderful, traditional, established, been around forever, very funky studio. I mean, some of the people there go harvest their own clay out of the river. You know, it's that kind of a place. And I would make these things. And I would be so proud when it came out of the kiln, and they would look at it and say, oh dear, but it doesn't hold water. And that didn't happen just once. That happened 100 times. So I had no choice but to call this show that. So anyway, by working with the clay, the challenges of it, by not knowing what the rules are. I didn't know what rules I was breaking because I didn't know the rules. I felt a freedom of just responding to it and letting myself get into it. And so I would let the clay speak. I'd have notions, oh, I want to try something big, and then it would be like this. All right, okay, whatever, I'll just go with it. And I'd get these pieces through the process and then take them home to my studio, and then they became found objects. So then I would respond to them to communicate whatever it was I felt it needed to say. And all of it is very personal, and all of it is about a very difficult 2 years I've had. So that's the pivot.
That's great, that's great. Well, there's so many interesting things about that. I think that the way that you've taken clay and sometimes made it look like textile, and then textile kind of having like a firmer, more structural kind of feel in the work. There's a kind of confusion of materiality that's very exciting, and that brings those together. And that the sort of content seems much more of a, you know, from here. I mean, the materiality is always from here in your work, but the ideas are often, you know, there's a cerebral quality to them. And this feels very like felt, as though I feel as though like I could be in a dark room, you know, like you made them in a dark room. Not because she didn't know what she was doing, but because it was about this discovery that you were talking about with the clay, right? A discovery of meaning through the forming of an object, which is really exciting. And leaves all of this, there are a lot of vessels. So there's a lot of space in those vessels for us as viewers to kind of climb in and roam around and imagine ourselves and be held and all of that. So I think that not being a kind of directed narrative is very exciting. And I can't wait to see what happens next with that. But, okay, Roya. Related questions. I mean, yeah, leave that. Could you just go in there, right? Well, I can feel like it's speaking out and also it's calling us in, right? Both a body and a being and a form and all these things. So your work uses distinct narratives, right? Because there's even including text that is sometimes legible, sometimes not legible. And so when it's legible, we read it, right? We can actually see what it says. So text from women's protests in Iran and around the world is something that is in your work very often, as well as images that have very specific cultural histories and references. And so those are historical as well as photo, news-based, from around the world. I don't want to even sort of make it small. And so we read that material in a very literal way, right? We're like, this is what it says. And that's a directed thing. And then what is fascinating is that you then you then fracture that into these kind of exploding that out in a way to kind of complicate that narrative and that text so that the meaning also fractures, which I think is very interesting. So we see both a directed meaning and then a kind of fractured meaning. And they seem to be sort of surrounding fractured bodies. They seem to be like bodies to me and sort of fractured bodies. So I'm interested in your use of text and how you think about that in the work. And also your ideas around fracturing and the way that fracturing can both tell a story and also complicate a story. Fracturing is communicating and complicating the story, right? In the way that the text also is communicating and complicating the story. So, yeah, do you want to say something about that?
So I've been using text, for many years before, but the text came from Persian poetry. But I stopped using that since 2016 because of the division happened here. So I feel like we are so divided right now. And I was thinking of also the impact of hate speech on society and how the racially motivated attacks really rise. So I was really shocked by hearing those quotes, those speeches. So, and also I was shocked by, reading about those attacks. So I started collecting my text from this context, but the way I write it, it's more like a headline news. In my show in Brooklyn, I exhibited my text, and it was really I wanted people to get close to it, to read it, but here I decided to somehow hide some part of it and just leave a few fragments for audience to read and have their own interpretation and think about the meaning of these words behind it. So that's how I use text, and also I use yes, I am a feminist. I think a lot about women's empowerment, about the networking, the connection, solidarity we could make. So I use some part of my text taken from women's activists in Iran here. I try to bring different voices into my work, and also getting some of my text also comes from the women's strike or women's movement, like A Day Without Women. So that march happened all over the world, and I think it was beautiful, talking about the common struggles we are facing. So what was
the fracturing?
Yes, well, yes. I lived in Iran, but since childhood I moved a lot. It happens first because of the war between Iran and Iraq, and then because of my dad's job. So I lived in many places, and then I came to the States. I lived in New England for almost 12 years, and then I moved to California. So I've been in many places with completely different cultures, and I feel I am fragmented, and I'm not made of only one piece. And so the fragmentation comes from my own experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've been thinking a lot with everything going on in the world now, the complicated ways that we have to, move through the day, both our very personal experience and lives, and then in the kind of social spaces that we live in. That idea of that we contain multitudes. It's just that phrase keeps coming up to me, that because everyone is trying to push us into this place or that place, or flatten us into one thing or another, and the complexity of each person. We each are really a world, right? We're a world of identities, a world of experiences, a world of things like, living all around the world. There's all these things that each of us, if we went around the room, could speak about, and that's, so I think that fracturing for me, that these forms feel like bodies, they're intact, they're held, the thread holds the bodies, and yet they're tenuous, and they're fragile, but also strong. That's one of the things about textile, right? Sewing is very soft and flexible and all of that, and fragile, but also incredibly strong, right? Textile work is incredibly strong. So I feel like these feel like skins that have been like, written upon or sewn together, or things that would wrap a body or map a body. So yeah, do you think of them as bodies? Is that a part of the way you think of them? I mean, they also contain multitudes, so we don't want to reduce them to just that either, but I'm interested in your thinking.
I think of them as a body because most of them are the size of my own body. But I think of organs to create the structure. Yeah, I think of them as a body.
So do you map the objects in your making do you kind of map them to the scale of your body? That's really fascinating.
I do, yeah. Well, I make many drawings. Well, I make one drawing and then I make another drawing out of that and make another drawing. So the process of making drawings helps me to, I guess, figuring out the structure of my work. And I don't know, somehow usually it's hard for me to make the work are smaller than me or bigger than me. I don't know. I've been doing that for
No, that feels really feels like powerful content.
I feel like it feels right for the work I'm doing because I am combining, my own personal experience with other people's experience. So it feels right to think of it as my domain.
Yeah, that makes me think of the performative. I mean, I think all objects are performative, right? Like you were talking earlier about how this work is so new for you, and still kind of trying to understand what it's actually about, and how vulnerable it wants to be, and how it, I think the work is outside of us, right? So it has a different kind of vulnerability. So you don't really know what it is until it is performed, right? So this is a debut of these objects. And these also feel really performative. I mean, again, all objects are, but these have a particularly performative. I almost feel like they could be worn, they could exist in different contexts where you could have a dance or something where they could actually wrap a body while some could hang. Do you think about that as them beginning to move around a little?
I see your point. I know what you mean, but I don't know. I think there are so many, especially with this body of work, there are so many unknown things about it, and I think maybe I don't want to know it. I like the way it is, and I like to keep the ambiguity of the work.
Yeah, that makes me think of like text as, like a letter is a shape, right? An A is a triangle, and it also is a symbol that points to something outside. So the way that you're taking text and then fracturing that as well, sometimes it's readable, sometimes it's not, never lets us kind of fix on a particular meaning. We're directed, and then we're taken over here, and then we're directed, and we're taken over here.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I know, especially right now, people, they want to, take you to their own world. Like, you should see things the way we are seeing, but we all are different, and I feel like they have to respect it. And I don't want to give only one message to the audience.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's really powerful. Also the hanging, the way that they're hanging. Do you want to say anything about hanging?
I mean, I like how the suspension. I like to suspend my work. It brings more vulnerability to my work and fragility, but still there is a stillness about it. I like so the contrast between stillness and fragility is important to my work.
You're using red thread and black thread.
Yes.
Is there a particular, that seems to be a theme in your work?
It is, yeah, and red, I think red is the I don't know, I think it's the most distinctive color. It is really recognizable in many cultures, and also, it represents, the flesh of your body, what's going on underneath. That's why I always go for, I went for red for this exhibition, and also I use black thread and I use triangle. The way I use triangle, especially in the bigger piece with text, I wanted to represent bugs, flies around my board.
Flies, why flies?
Because of the content of the word, the kind of maybe a bit disturbing, but also, I made it I try to make it appealing, but I want to have some, a bit of aggressiveness, but it is not.
That's not, so the kind of visceral of the body.
Yes, yeah.
Visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm conscious of time, but I also want to make sure we have time. Do you want to add anything to?
Yes.
I have a question, which is when you put your work, small works together, sometimes it's hard, it's still, sort of in a group, like work, but, different places. What is it that, that the objects, how does that change the objects themselves and your choice of displaying them like that? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
I don't know if I can give words to it. It's mostly a feeling that I want each object to feel like that the object next to it enhances it and has it present itself in a more authentic way than if it was next to something else. Or all by itself. And these smaller shelves, they're meant to be kind of like what's going on in my head, guys, These are my little things. It gives a window into my process because it's not only ceramics and not only fiber, but there are wax molds and wire knit vessels and all sorts of things, because that's kind of what I do. I work in material and innovate material and traditional technique, sort of causing an alchemy into something else, much like clay, right? So.
Okay, what window is that? If your work is a window, can you talk about that?
Oh, this piece is called Tell Them Everything, and it is hand woven copy excerpts from my journal on an ink loom. And it's also hand braided autobiographical materials with found objects that are personal to me and ceramic bits. And it's a very personal sort of journal piece. It's ongoing. And you're welcome to join the fun, because I have a book over here, and it's asking you to tell them everything too. What's going on? How are you? Things like that. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, I want to open it up. I just have one last.
Yeah.
The idea of vessels that hold and don't hold seems really important in all of this. You want to say something about vessels?
Yes. Well, vessels are historically meant to hold sustenance, wine, food, grain. They were made to cook with. They were things like that. They were very utilitarian. My vessels are containers that don't contain. So the way I like to think of it is they're vessels for me as I'm pouring myself into them, and then I let them go. They don't have bottoms, they don't contain, they don't hold water.
That's great. Sorry. Where are you being busy? That's a wonderful note to end on also, because these are like bodies that can't hold, right? They're sort of open bodies too, if the body is also a vessel, so that's really, so I would like to hear from all of you if anyone has questions for these amazing artists. Anybody, we'll take a few minutes for that, or do you want to, yeah, let's take a couple of questions. Thank you for the one. Anybody? Yes.
I really love looking at your work. I'm going to look at it more deeply after. But I was thinking about books when I'm looking at it, and I guess you're talking about all the meaning behind the stories. Are books important? And are they specifically, because it's all text, and I just feel like it's a dream. I don't know. I just want to hear something.
Such a good, great question.
I just came from a residency, and one artist said the same thing about books. I think books are important, of course, but I don't know. I feel like everything is so difficult right now. So for me, I stitch all the fragments, and then I start cutting it, and I start making it into more fragments, and then I put it back together. It feels like, you open the book and start reading it, and then start tearing the book and fly it in the air. So that's how.
That process you're talking about, making, cutting up, putting back together is quilting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And like what those.
And you have it. Yeah.
Right, and these funnels that I made, well, that's their working title stuff, their real title, are quilts, piecing together of,
Right.
memories, yeah.
And then the books having text, like all these histories being, again, fragmented
Yes.
and kind of disseminated and dissembled. Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? One more, and then we'll let you all look at
It's
them.
not really a question, it's just a comment. I think we were just talking about what it is about, it's also about men.
Sorry, I couldn't.
Tear it apart.
Yeah.
Life, encountering various things. And Jodi, what you were saying, and Patricia also about vessels, they don't hold water, but they hold space, they make space. And so that's how.
Can I borrow that?
It's really, yeah.
Thank you.
It's true. And there's so many themes, mending, that the idea of books and text and mending and all that. There's so much more we could talk about. But I think it's time to look at the work and for you guys to be able to talk to these incredible artists individually, one-on-one. I hope you will. And I'm such an honor to have this opportunity to talk to you guys. Really.
Before everyone leaves, I'd like to thank everybody in my life. Everybody who knows me, because they put up with something that I've imposed on them as a result of me getting ready for the show. So thank you. And thank you to Patricia, and thank you to the gallery, and thank you to my tech guy.
Well, artists, it takes a community. It really, really does. We can't really work alone. So I'm really grateful and honored to have been asked. And thank you for listening to me. And I'm happy to be welcome to this community. So thank you.